I hope everybody's feeling a little bit better than, unfortunately, the MVP was last night. Joel Embiid, he will undergo an MRI on his left knee after injuring it in the fourth quarter of Tuesday night's 119-107 loss to the Golden State Warriors. Embiid, you can see here, he grabbed that knee in pain. He ultimately got up. He did limp to the locker room. He did not return to this game after this collision. Ramona, what's the latest that you're hearing on Joel's injury? You know,
he's going to get an MRI today, and then I think there's a lot because of his knee injury history. Like each knee has its own book. Okay, of stuff that he's had in the past. And so there's a lot of analysis that has to go in on, okay, what does this mean from his previous injuries? And from what I understand, this is a new injury. This is the same knee that kept him out of the Denver game that's been swelling up on him, that's causing him a lot of pain. Right. But that injury that he suffered last night when Kuminga fell on him, this has now created a new injury that's going to have to be evaluated here. Obviously, you can see, I watched this game and I couldn't even watch. Right. Like, I was like, what is he doing out there? Like, he just looked like he was in pain all night, dragging his leg on the court, and now he's added yet another injury on that. Yeah, he looked visibly uncomfortable. The 76ers have now slipped to 5th in the Eastern Conference. And you've talked about this, Perk, how Joel Embiid, he doesn't necessarily have the runway that other superstars do because of his injury history to sustain this greatness for a certain level of time.
Yeah, right. I mean, and look, he's 29 years old, and we don't know how many years he have left at playing at this level. It's not going to be like a Giannis, or even you could put, say, Anthony Davis, and we know Anthony Davis' history. So it raised a level of concern, not just for Joel Embiid in his career, but how teams in the Philadelphia 76ers view him, right? We had this conversation about what do the 76ers need to do to make sure that Joel Embiid is happy so that he don't think about leaving, right? At the start of the season when James Harden left. Now, like, how are teams viewing him? How Philly view Joel right now? Like, do they think they actually could win a championship with Joel Embiid as their number one option because of his history of not being able to get through an 82-game season and be able to get in the postseason and play at a high level? Right. Because of his health.
Perk, you know how, all of you know how, in basketball particularly, you think of like players, like situations, similar context. And I was wincing when I saw this, Ramona, like you. I didn't want to see it. It reminds me of Amar'e Stoudemire. And I'm not saying the injuries are the same, but Perk, when you talk about what a player can be over what period of time, remember how great Amar'e was at his peak and he couldn't stay there? Ramona, when you said there's a book on each knee, that's where I thought, oh my goodness, this reminds me of that. And then so what do you do? What do you do if you're the team? How do you approach big personnel decisions? What do you do if you're the player and you start to have to manage it differently? So it's just a downer all the way around for the Sixers and Joel Embiid.
I mean, look, I said on this show on Monday, Malika, this is an injury, this is a situation with his knee that he's going to have to manage all season long. All season long. And that's before he suffered a new injury when Kuminga fell on him. Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to have this conversation, though, and not talk about the 65-game minimum that is now in place for the first time this year for postseason awards for the MVP. And earlier today, I caught up within the last hour with Executive Vice President, Head of Basketball Operations, Joe Dumar, about just that. And I asked him how the league feels about this new policy.
Anytime you put something in, Malika, there are going to be some unintended consequences. And we knew that going in, and that's why we put the threshold at, like, you can miss up to 20% of the season and still be eligible. But we always knew that, look, there could be a situation where one of the players went past 20% of the season who's having a good year. But you can't, like, not put the rule in because of that one or two guys that it may affect.
Are there any discussions about changing this for next season?
There's been no discussions about that. No one has called and said we should, renegotiate this or anything like that. There's been no calls like that.
How much did this factor into Joel playing?
I think look, he's not playing because of the 65 games, but it's always front and center in that discussion. Right? You can't separate. He's playing because the Sixers need him. I mean, they need him out there to win, and they'd been losing on this trip here. Maxey's obviously got an injury. Tobias has had an illness that he's been dealing with, and so he's playing because they need the win. Like, they just flat out need him on the court. But 65 games is in your head because this is a guy who didn't get Rookie of the Year. When he certainly was the best rookie that year, but he barely played in enough games. He's already lost one MVP where he probably didn't play in enough games, and I think that affected his votes. And now I think with this situation, he's going to probably not be eligible for All-NBA and for
Ramona,
MVP.
You know what? Playing games should not be seen as some great luxury. And Joe Dumar, who was something of an Iron Man, understands that probably as well, better than most. And Malika, yes, it is more players than he may have indicated there. It doesn't mean you don't go to the rule. The league has a real tough balancing act here. This was put in as much for fans and sponsors. You're trying to appease. You're putting a product out there that is put up for thumbs up and thumbs down every year.
Do you consider games
I did
played
it before.
when you voted?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. There is no voter who already doesn't consider.
I wouldn't say no voter.
There are very few, most of the voters I know consider that when they're doing it. And so look at Tyrese Halliburton and how he is playing this year. The man will lose out on $41 million this year if he doesn't make All-NBA. Not because of how he's playing. He only has 1 year to do it, but because of the legitimate injuries that have kept him out. There has to be a balance here.
But we're talking about awards. And so, first of all, those things should not be tied. Okay, so let's get that out.
Okay.
That should not be tied. In no way should our votes help determine to any degree what a player's compensation is. None. That's just dumb and it's wrong. Now, separately, there were players last year I didn't vote for on first or second team. I'm not going to say I didn't vote for him at all. I might have put him on third team. My third team was loaded with people who played. But mine was not 65. It might have been 60.
Yeah.
So, but it's a difficult thing. I think Joe's position, it's a tough position to take and have. But again, if you didn't have load management and 4 out of 5 players on starting lineups missing games and visiting arenas, the league would never have had to visit this in the first place.
And it goes to my question. How did we get here? How did we get here? And the same people that's complaining about it, the players, the coaches, the front offices, right? They're the reason that we're in this position now. They're the reason that they have rules in place, right? Accountability means everything. I'm going back and I'm looking. Barkley, career average 72 games played. Malone, a career average 81 games played. Magic, a career average 76 games played. Bird, a career average 77 games played. Jordan, a career average 80 games played. So at the end of the day, it's like we're sitting up here and we're saying, oh, it's unfair. But to be honest, no one is screaming Greg Popovich in the San Antonio Spurs because the number one factor was because of load management. So at the end of the day, we're talking about something that they have made this bed and they have to lay in it.
Right.
Rules are going to be in place.
Is there a tweak where, just like a disabled player exception where a guy's out for the year?
Appeal.
Or what about this? Bobby Marks floated tiers. So for MVP, maybe it's 65 games, but for All-NBA, maybe it's 58, which, by the way, is the same threshold you have to meet in order to lead the league in scoring. Why wouldn't it be 58 games? Look, I do want to underscore something Joe Dumar said. He said there are always unintended consequences that come with a rule that it did come from a place of, well, y'all made your bed, you got to lie in it. I'm not taking anything away from that.
Fair observation Joe Dumar's made. First of all, the phrase "consider the source." When you got Joe Dumars sitting up there, that means something. It means something to me that Joe Dumars is the person who's poring over this, studying it, agonizing over it.
65 games one time
in his career.
And guess what? Those players that I named, Barkley, Malone, Magic, Bird, and Jordan, he played against all them. So he watched those guys suit up night in and night out. Like, this is what you signed up for. This is what you signed up for.
It's a difficult discussion that is going to be revisited. I know it's not revisited yet, and that was a great interview with Joe.
Thank you.
It is going to come up now because, and particularly as it relates to Embiid, who you see in an unfortunate situation that was not of his own doing. But as Joe said, you know, are you going to revisit even single digits, Malika? And you raise a good point. If it's 5 players, if it's 6 players, are you going to raise it? And by the way, one quick thing. I've had players pull me aside in past years before the rule, and they knew I had a vote. And they said to me, that guy missed 23 games. You going to vote for him over me?
Uh-huh.
And it's a jarring question. It's sobering because you know the people who are out there 80 games like that all the time, what, they don't deserve a special consideration or nod? Yes, they do.
Look, the decision is probably going to be made for him now. I mean, he was thinking about this every single game.
Yep.
Can I go out there? Is this a game that you want to take off? Do I want to put myself through this? It makes that decision in Denver look very different now.
Right.
But the decision now with this latest injury, I think is probably going to make the decision.
The only place that I don't think any one of us wants to get to is voting amongst the best of the rest, where the best have been taken out just by nature of not playing 65 games, maybe because they played 60, 4 or 3 or 2, and that we're looking at it saying, okay, well, I guess these are our options, but that's not what the game that we love has to offer is best.
Yeah,